Okay, we have the Buffalo Plus team here, Dan Fates, as well as Mike Catalana. We're talking that Seton Hall poll saying 61% of sports fans would not go to a game, a sporting event, if they did not have a vaccine for coronavirus. Mike, what do you make of that?
Well, right now, in the circumstances we're in, I'm not surprised at all. In fact, I'm almost surprised the number's not a little bit higher. Look at the world we're living in right now. I mean, you go to the grocery store, they want you to wear a mask. Most people are camped out at home. I mean, we are living in that world. And right now, those other sports aren't even talking about fans. I think a lot of people have in their mind football. That's still a few months off. But our world needs to change a lot before people even think about that risk, because nobody's even given them the opportunity to go to anything.
And it's crazy to think, you're told to pretty much stay under 10 people. I'm not even seeing my family. We're just doing these kind of interviews and seeing my family like this. There's 70,000 people that go to a football game. I feel like we are very far away from going from 10 to allowing 70,000 people to get to one another. It's a crazy thought, but again, I'm no infectious disease specialist. Things change very quickly.
Well, I also want the point of the fact that, yeah, maybe the teams can socially distance in terms of football, maybe not allowing fans to be. But, Mike, what do you make of the tailgate situation, or, what's happening in private lots or things like that, even waiting to get into a game?
Well, I mean, I was thinking about that when you say waiting to get into a game. Look at the way sports changed just when we had to come up with ways to scan everybody, check bags, all those things, the delays coming in. I think if we're at that point where you have to check fans coming into a game, they're not going to be coming into a game. Different with the players. If the players are just going, they could be getting daily testing. They could be getting their temperature taken. You are not doing that with 70,000 people.
And even if, how could you keep social distancing? I'm just thinking a baseball game, because baseball is like the most immediate sport. Would everybody sit 6 chairs apart from one another? And would that be fun? Is that what you would want? Listen, I'm all for sports, getting sports to bring back to normalcy. I understand it's not the most important thing going on right now, but I'll take anything. But there is also that risk. What if there's that Rudy Gobert moment where everything stops? If somebody tests positive in a game, you have to shut everything back down. At what point then do you feel comfortable resetting it? I think you need to know that that's a possibility. And until that's no longer a possibility, I don't know if we have sports.
Well, I like having the carrot of football dangling above our heads right now. I mean, Dan, how much do you think of it as an advantage, the fact that we're in April right now? We're talking about the football season, the regular season, that doesn't start until September.
I'd like to think that, I can't imagine a world without an NFL season, but I also couldn't imagine a world without the NCAA tournament or an NCAA season, to that matter. So things can change quickly for good or for bad, and it's just an interesting dynamic. It is nice to know that it is kind of far away in the distance, and hopefully things will be okay by then, but there's always that but and what if.
Yeah, and the other part, when we talk about these players and setting up these bubbles, right, where you just put them in, these are people. These are people with relationships and families and people, and I'll hear somebody say, oh, they make a lot of money. Okay, there's a player whose wife's going to have a baby, or a player whose, child is ill, or just wants to be around their family. Are we isolating them and then asking them to play? And then you get to the point where if you're the guy with a lot of money and you're saying, I don't need this, what's the team going to say? Oh, I'm sorry, Drew Brees, you have to come and play football because we've determined the only way to play is to isolate you from your family for the next 6 months.
And it's also interesting, too, thinking about all this testing. We talk about, they get their temperature tested, there'll be these rapid tests. Part of me wants sports back more than anything to bring some sense of normalcy, not only just to gamble on, but just a sense of
no, it's to gamble on.
it's some of it to gamble on. But it's also, should these pro athletes be the one that could be using these rapid tests? Like, if we were able to develop some tests, do we want to use them on athletes? I don't know.
I think part of that would be these leagues have a lot of money, and I think these leagues would be investing a lot of their own money to get their own testing done. And I really do think that's the only way they could do it. Because if they're taking those tests away from people, certainly people on the front lines of dealing with this, the
Yeah,
backlash should be huge. Now, you could say, if you can come up with the money to do this, you should be using for a better cause. But at a certain point, it is a private business. And if they determine that, I guess that's one thing. But to Dan's point, if you're just using the test that should be used for somebody else, that's not good.
Mike, how would you make the decision whether or not to go to a game if we're going to fast forward to September?
I would say if you're talking about from a fan perspective, I would say if it's at a point where we are still at a general risk, meaning without a vaccine. So it's saying, well, the virus is down, the virus is contained, the virus is gone at the moment, right? I'm not comparing it to the flu, but in terms of it's not flu season, so it would be not COVID season. I don't think people are going to trust that. I think if it's still out there in this sense, I wouldn't feel comfortable. I wouldn't feel comfortable putting you guys in that position to go and cover events.
Thank you.
And I don't think
I appreciate that, Mike. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I don't think anybody's going to feel right and not comfortable going in that way. Sure, we want to go. Honestly, I think the next thing to talk about is how are fans really going to feel about these games when they're played with such a different environment without the fans?
Well, Dan, jumping off of that, how much, I mean, I know we joke about 12th man and all that, but how different would it be for these players to play in front of no one?
Massive. I think especially for NFL games. I'm not trying to get cliche with Defend Your Dirt by Sean McDermott or anything like that, but football does go off of crowd. It goes off of momentum. Yeah. Pretty much every sport, I know we talked about recently, golf's probably the only one that I would be okay with. Even tennis, they feed off crowd. That's part of the experience of a performance by an athlete. And I think that it's a huge part of the game. I think you take that part away.
And Dan, you referenced two sports where there's no home field.
Yeah.
Right? So you have individual athletes at a tennis tournament, even though there's more popular players than others. But look what we just changed in football. That one team that gets the bye and the home field to get to the Super Bowl, right? We know how important. You talked about gambling. Home field means a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm not just talking about the
3
advantage.
points.
Yeah. I'm not just talking about the advantage for one team or another. I'm talking about, think about watching those games and it's almost silence, almost like watching a practice.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be very different.
Yeah.
It's true. And going off of Mike's point from earlier, I have a pregnant wife at home. She's a teacher. And I think that once I know that schools start to get reopened, right, I think I have a better sense. So I still am holding out that hope that September is usually football season at schools. I think that's what people would like to get a sense of normalcy. Once kids go back to school and they say that my wife's okay, who's 23 weeks pregnant right now, I have a better sense of going, all right, I can go out in public and I'll feel not like I'm, flipping a coin on if I'm going to get a disease.
Yeah. All right. Well, there's still plenty more time. Hopefully football season, if safe, will still be in the future. Thanks, guys, for joining us. And make sure to subscribe to Buffalo Plus here on YouTube. For Dan Fates, Mike Catalana, I'm Jenna Cottrell.